College football's kind of got a fog right now. You've all driven through it. It's where you can't see 5 feet in front of you. Use the low beams, kids, by the way. Use the low beams when it's foggy outside. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but just trust Uncle JP on this. I think I've stumbled upon a hidden disease in college football. And that disease is a lot of people worrying about a lot of things that they actually don't care about. Imagine that. Now, I know this sounds like it could very well correlate with a lot of things that go on in the world, and it could. But this is not a political show. It's not any other thing show. It's just a college football show. However, you can rinse, repeat. You can take this and apply it wherever you want to. Do you find yourself worrying about a lot of things that at the end of the day, if you did a self-inventory of your mind, don't matter? They don't affect you. They don't impact you. I think we're doing that in college football a little bit. So I'm talking to one of ours at the gym the other day, Pate State alumni. And this Pate State alum said, man, I don't know. I love the show. Like, I watched the show, but I love the games in the fall too. But I just, man, sport's not in a good place, is it? I said, interesting. Continue. So pull out the Post-its, writing down for a future segment. And he gave me one. He absolutely did. This was about a 20-minute conversation, but it boiled down to, I don't love where NIL is. This whole NIL Congress thing, it's making me nervous. A lot of you have seen those headlines. You haven't really heard it talked about on this show because it's boring to me. But it's out there. And so at least one of you cares about it. And you didn't like the NIL Congress stuff. That's a mess. That was his exact word, a mess. And I said, all right, what else? And he said, well, the NIL thing is going to lead to players making big money, and players in college football making big money. That could ruin locker rooms, man. And I said, okay. You know, I'm working on not interrupting people, by the way, and working with some other people in my life on the same thing. And so I let him continue. And he said, the transfer portal has just eroded away loyalty. Loyalty used to mean something. You committed somewhere, you played all 4 or 5 years, whatever the case may be. And now it's just guys are free agents every single year. And that was about it. It was those 3 things. And so here's what I'm going to ask, because I think a lot of you may have nodded your head. On the surface, you may have agreed with 1, 2, or all 3 of his points. And I'm not saying I haven't thought those things. Look, hand over heart. So I must be honest right now. I'm not saying I've never thought those things. I'm not asking you that tonight. I'm asking you, do you really care? Or in other words, are you sure what you think matters to you actually matters to you? I had to do a little look in the mirror myself about this, so I'd say about 2 years ago. And I realized I was a fraud. I was claiming things were a big deal to me, and they really weren't that big a deal to me. Now, we do the whole drill all the time of, hey, put yourself in the position of a fan in a stadium on a Saturday, mid-third quarter, clock's winding down. You know the whole drill. I do a lot. And bam, hit the pause button. Is any of that stuff in your mind? And the answer is most of the time no. And so then I surmise, well, it must not matter all that much to you if you still got college football the way you want it. But that's a very simple-minded way of looking at it, I'll admit. So I want to dive into it a little bit here. Let's first go to the NIL thing, the NIL Congress thing. I promise this is not going to be a segment on this. I'm going to take like a minute and a half on it. Yes, it's all over the news. Yes, it's in a lot of headlines. I would suggest to you that the NIL Congress thing right now is in the headlines because a lot of folks, man, this is going to sound bad. There's some good coverage being done of this story, okay? And I would love to leave it to the capable hands of those actually equipped to cover that story, and that would be fine. There's this entire orbit, though, of other people who cover college football who really don't know a lot about football. And so when this gets plopped in their lap, they prey on it. They love it. They love it for the same reason they love storylines. They love it for the same reason they love scandal, because those things make sense to them a lot more than the inside trap does. And so I think that has polluted a lot of the airwaves, so to speak, with a whole lot of talk about this story, and it may have fooled you into thinking it's impacting you. It's not impacting you. It's not impacting me. Now, it's impacting someone. The same way that, like, river flooding in Mogadishu may be impacting someone right now, and it's not to be laughed at, but at the same time, my drive home tonight is going to be fine, because I don't live there. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and it was beautifully sunny today, so it would be foolish for me to worry about that. Just as if you're a Troy Trojans fan, it would be very foolish for you to be thinking about how much you can't wait for this season to get here, but it's a little tempered this year. My excitement has waned a touch because, well, Jeff, well, Bob, well, Steve, is Congress going to come through on an NIL bill? Who cares? Not you. You shouldn't care right now. At least if you're not in the room, you shouldn't care. The other thing I ask a lot of times to myself is, if I didn't already know that story and I just exposed myself to the sport on Saturdays, could I even tell? Like, could you even tell there's a battle going on between a lot of powers that be that you'll never meet and you don't know the names of, and Congress as well, about trying to get federal antitrust legislation in college football? I just think it's dumb to worry about, okay? That's what I'm telling you. That's the most educated way I could put it. It's kind of dumb to worry about. I didn't tell him that because it's not very smart to call people dumb in the middle of the gym. But leave it to the words of Meemaw to sum up my thoughts on this. Not all problems are problems for all. Beautiful. Meemaw always said it better than I ever could. Then we get around to this whole players making money is going to ruin the fabric and integrity of the locker room. Now, I dismissed this one a little bit. I will be real on this. I dismissed this a little bit the first time this argument came around. I thought it was overblown. I thought it was sort of the thing that people were going to anecdotally pick out examples of to bolster an argument if they were against players making money. And I could do that for anything. I mean, I could just as easily I could show you a ton of examples of players doing very good things with the money they make through NIL and impacting a lot more lives than just themselves. So we could wage that little mini war all we wanted to. But I will say, if you believe that, if you think players making significant NIL money because of NIL being available to them, if you think players making significant NIL money really is eroding away the integrity of the locker room and the sport, just give me specific examples. I don't mean even, hey, this happened at LSU that you didn't know about. This happened at Oklahoma State. I just mean generally give me specific examples. How specifically is that mechanism going to do that? Because I think the exact opposite is true, for the record. I never kept my room clean when I was growing up, for example. But then I worked construction, and I kept the work site spotless. Number one, because I knew the quicker we cleaned it up, the quicker we could go home. And number two, I knew my paycheck depended on it. That's happening in college football. When you have real money on the line, if I, Pate State Construction, sign tight end Colin to an NIL deal, you know what it's contingent on? Performance. You know what it's contingent on? Him staying out of trouble. You know what Colin's motivated to do? Perform and stay out of trouble. You know the only thing that really matters to you as a fan for most of these kids you'll never meet, them performing and them staying out of trouble. Where's the rub? Where's the downside to that? I keep asking that to this small but dedicated group of folks who claim to me that NIL is going to rip locker rooms to shreds, and I don't ever doubt it could happen on a case-by-case basis. We just had Lane Kiffin on the show Thursday, and he said, yes, sometimes guys work to the NFL to get life-changing money, but now a small percentage of guys are getting life-changing money in college. Sometimes that can inject ego, and sometimes that's something that you wouldn't have had to deal with as a college coach that you now do. Deal with it. Deal with it. He's not quitting his job tomorrow, nor any other these other guys. You deal with it. But by and large, the NIL money is all tied to performance, keeping your nose clean, keeping your head on straight. That's what you want players to do anyway. And that's what best serves and benefits the locker room anyway. No one wants bad citizens to be representing their branding. And if you're going to tell me, well, Josh, that's the true spirit of NIL you're talking about. But we all know in real life, NIL is just pay for play. It's the same thing, guys. Long term, if you keep paying bad and damaged assets to play football for you, you're going to suck and your staff's going to get fired. You're going to run out of money because, believe it or not, there is a finite amount of it. And so the best ones out there, the ones that are operating at a high level, the ones that keep winning, are going to keep winning because they allocate funds to worthy assets. Now, I know it seems a little gross to be talking about a player and using words like asset, but we try and be real. I mean, it's after 8 o'clock on the East Coast. The kids have largely either started to go to bed or are already in bed, so we can be real about this. So I think it's a non-issue there. And even then, man, even if I did, at the end of the day, hate the idea that those kids are making that money, I think it's a little dirty to think that way. But if you do, could you tell the difference? I ask again. You don't see what car they show up to the team facility in. You're just watching, either from your seat in the stadium or from your seat on the couch. Can you tell one bit of difference when it's 3rd and 2 in the middle of the third quarter? No, you can't. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. And thirdly, This one, there's more legitimacy to. I've just gotten over it myself. I want to see where you guys are on this. There is the whole transfer portal has ruined the concept of loyalty to a team. I know some of you are rolling your eyes already because you never believed this. I am one of the more doe-eyed, big-hearted, traditionalist, idealistic fans that did used to feel this way. You have to forgive us, okay? Some of us viewed college football more through like a Disney, Bernstein Bear type lens. It was like utopian to us. Then you see behind the curtain and you realize, oh, these are real people with real problems and real flaws. But yeah, once upon a time, I watched college football because I knew I thought the players didn't get paid, and there was loyalty to the brand. They're committing to that school. That school didn't draft them. They chose that school, and they go there, blood, sweat, tears, 3, 4, 5 years, because they love Oklahoma, because they love Illinois. I don't want to shortchange these guys because I'm around them a lot. A lot of them do feel that way about that brand. And if you play for several of them, then to me, that used to be something that was a non-starter for me. I'll put it in words that are familiar to those of you who have watched The Office. I'm all about loyalty, okay? If there was somewhere, though, that valued loyalty more, I'm going wherever they value loyalty the most. And that's the attitude I think a lot of players have. And that's the attitude Dwight Schrute had back in the day. I used to care about this. I just don't as much anymore. I candidly think a lot of you have stopped caring about it, only because the shock factor has worn off. When you first saw the portal open up, yeah, it was a stunner to the senses, and maybe it still is. And it's not that I love it. I would certainly prefer for guys to stay put, even if they have the option. I'm all about them having the option. I would just love for them to stay put because in a perfect world, you don't want to leave South Carolina. You don't want to leave Virginia Tech. Everything's going good, blah, blah, blah. But that's not the real world. And so I always thought the coaches can move, why can't players move argument was kind of dumb. So I actually don't ever use that argument. I think players should be able to move around just because they should be able to move around, regardless of what coaches can or can't do, because it's an apples to bowling ball comparison. So, are you worried about these things still? I guess if you are, let me know, and I'll try and work with you in the comments individually. I just think that this game is being played at an insanely high level right now. Like, there's so much to be excited about. And as for the normal fan, which is us, there's not very much to worry about. If you guys think that they're not going to get that NIL stuff figured out, if you don't think they're going to get potential revenue sharing or employment status figured out, you're crazy. There is way too much money on the line to allow that to get screwed up. In other words, to allow it to ultimately cost them major paydays. It's just not going to happen. Conference realignment, I don't like it now. I've talked to you about that before. And I didn't talk about conference realignment tonight. There's some chatter out there about maybe there being a certain threshold that you can't go past. Monopolistic in nature, in other words. So just because it seems like it's a runaway train, and trust me, I've been around a few of them, just because it seems like a runaway train doesn't always mean it's a runaway train. And sometimes trains are fun to be on, even if they look a little out of control. And thirdly, and finally, I'm kind of glad sometimes we have a little crazy in the room. I know structure is wonderful and all in your personal life, but every now and then in my sporting existence, I love not being able to see around the corner. I saw an article that was back in like 2019. I can't remember which publication had this out. And it was where they did a kind of a roundtable and they gathered a lot of their writers. It may have been at The Athletic, I think it was. And they gathered their writers and they were trying to predict what the sport will look like in 5 years. And it was terrible because no one had the skill to predict even 24 months down the road. I mean, Greg Sankey was talking about how, expansion's done. They announced OU in Texas like a year and a half later. So I don't need to have it all figured out. Just give me those Saturdays in the fall. It doesn't take much to please me.